Personally, I like PhORCAS because it, first of all, it's related to PharmCast, which most of you are probably pretty familiar with, having used that system, getting into pharmacy school. Many schools use that. It does help to wrangle in all the different application materials and assimilates them, because if you can imagine doing this on paper and having people mail these things to you, it was very stressful for the applicants, because you would, for every reference writer, you had to go and they had to write the letter, sign it, seal it, give it to you. You had to have them all before you could mail it. It's a huge ordeal. Mm-hmm. And now it's timely and it's all there together. One of the things that I see that students maybe don't understand, and I don't see the interface for students, so I don't know exactly how it's told to you. But there's a way in PhORCAS for you to let the program see that you're applying, and so that they can see your materials as they roll in, versus you can also not show the program that you're applying, and then once it's complete, you just click a button and it all kind of plops on my plate. For me, it's easier just from if you've got 100 or 200 applications, it's easier for me to know who's coming in. Mm-hmm. So that I can plan. Most programs use a panel of people to review all the applications, and you want to make those sort of allocations and assignments as quickly as possible so that people can get started on it. And if I don't know that you're applying until the very last moment when the deadline is, then it's not like it's a penalty against you, but it's inconvenient. It creates a lot of work for me on that last day. We don't get a jump start on your application. And if it's one of those things where we can see that you're applying, but you've only got one letter of reference in so far and your transcripts aren't uploaded yet, then I know that you're applying. We're not going to review anything until it's ready, because there's no point in doing that. We're going to have to go back and re-review it anyway when all your reference writers are done. So we're just going to wait on it, but it allows us to plan a little bit. People have had technical problems in the past, and when it's somebody who's waiting until the end and then they want to just push the button and go, and their computer doesn't work and they miss the deadline, tough.
Yeah.
I feel really bad about that situation, when that happens, and it's happened more than once to people applying to our program. The other thing that I would say as a student is with PhORCAS is just to know the deadlines and to make sure that you've got everything. But once you ask a recommender to do the recommendation, I get emails every year with students who are worried about I'm looking at my applications and there's like one recommender who hasn't done their reference, right? That's not your fault, right? And so I've had students say, I'm not going to submit until I have everything and I'm waiting on this person. But many of you are asking faculty and pharmacists and people who are really busy, and you're not in a position as a student to march over to your faculty member's office and say, you need to get this this reference done for me, right? Like, you're not going to do that. And so you don't need to worry about it. If you have submitted your application and one of the reference writers or two of the reference writers aren't done, I'll give them a day or two. But if it's not done and you told them what the deadline was, I'm calling them. You don't need to call them. I'm calling them and saying, you are supposed to write this reference for this person. Is there a problem with your PhORCAS? Can I help you? We're trying to be fair to the person that you care about, that you're writing a reference to. Please submit it, because we need to evaluate our application. And so as a student, sometimes there's a lot of anxiety with that. If the references are late, But you don't need to worry about that. Be very clear with your recommenders what the deadlines are for the various programs. And then once you do that, and you plug them into PhORCAS, then just don't worry about it after that. It's their problem, and the programs will follow up with them typically. And no one's really going to hold it against you that, somebody didn't. I mean, I remember who did my recommendations, and there's no way that I could get them to do anything on time.
So we haven't had a lot of problems with PhORCAS, so I don't know if I can't think of anything really good to say for that one. I have heard other programs give advice to students to make sure that they fill out all of the entries in PhORCAS. So take the information from their CV and put it in all the different areas, like volunteer and work experience. I think some programs use that to help filter information. So I think just to make sure you have that PhORCAS isn't working against you in that manner. But again, we haven't really had any issues that I can speak to personally.
So this kind of ties into CV somewhat. So I don't know if they have a demo or if you all have already signed up and can kind of see what they require you to enter, but they also have sections for leadership and research and presentations. And when we print your application, it prints their sections as well as your CV. So sometimes it's a glaring kind of oversight, if you will, or it can come across as being nonchalant or not really caring if you don't take the time to input those things into the PhORCAS side of it, because you can't always assume that people will go to your CV and look. I know me personally, when I'm reviewing applications, I look at your CV as well, but I would advise people not to just skip over the PhORCAS required sections because it might seem like you don't care enough to duplicate things from your CV. Another pitfall is following up on transcripts, which unfortunately is out of your hands for the most part. You submit to your college and then it's in their hands as far as submitting it and uploading it to PhORCAS, but just making sure that you're following up, because we can't always see all the steps that have been taken, and certainly being proactive and reaching out to your programs if there's an unforeseen circumstance that it's going to be past the deadline, because they may still consider your application even if your transcript is late. And then kind of along those same lines is your letters of recommendation. Sometimes those are late as well. So just making sure that you have open and clear communication with your reference writers, with what programs you're applying to, what's the earliest deadline, where the deadlines fall, and checking in with them to make sure that they submit, which I believe you can see as an applicant. But, we don't know that you asked them 2 months ago to write the letter and they didn't do it until after the deadline. And that's another area where maybe if that was late, a program would still consider your application as well.
I don't know that I've read one and put it down and said, that is the best letter of intent I've ever read. But I've read many of them that, have passages in them where I'm like, that was really good. Like I feel like I know what this person wants me to think about them and wants me to know, why they're a good fit for the program. Because really that's all we're looking for. The letter of intent is your chance to really connect what you want out of residency training, what you want out of your career, with what that program provides.
I thought about this a lot, and no single one stands out to me that I have come across in the past, but we do want to know, we really look for why the student or candidate wants to be here. Like, what is it about Ephraim McDowell Regional Medical Center in Danville, Kentucky that they are looking for? That's really what stands out to us the most, when they can speak truly to that and it is logical and seems sincere and it makes sense and seems real. And then really any kind of personalization goes far in my book. Like if we had a conversation about something at a showcase, or you were here as a student and we joked about something or learned something new or had some experience, if you can mention that, that really goes far for me.
I don't know that I really have one that stands out in particular, but I'll talk about things that we look for. or that can make it a positive kind of review, if you will.
Yeah.
So you always want to make sure, kind of like I talked about with CV again, that you're making yourself stand out and selling yourself. So think about things that aren't included elsewhere in the application or that haven't come across. Some of the things I think about are, any experiences that maybe don't have a section on your CV, or what your professional interests are, or what you're looking for in a program, and then coupling that with what that program has that fits well with your interests. So I like emergency medicine, obviously. So talking about what experience I had in emergency medicine so far, and then researching that particular program and inserting in there that I was looking forward to training because they were a burn center or a trauma center, things like that can show that you've looked into the program and how your interests fit with that. One thing to watch out for, which seems obvious, but we still see every single year, is obviously there's some components of your letter that you'll carry from program to program, but please don't forget to change who you're addressing it to, the specific name you mentioned throughout. Again, those are, you kind of get into the groove of things if you're applying to several programs, but just take time to double check, or if you have a friend or significant other who can double check that this is for Owensboro Health and it doesn't say UK in it. So those are the big things, kind of how you fit with the program and what your interests are, because that isn't really mentioned anywhere else in your application.
Same thing. If you misspell something in your letter of intent, you're probably going to the bottom of the pile in a lot of programs. If you put the wrong program or the wrong program director, you may go to the bottom of the pile. I think if you accidentally put, University of Louisville instead of University of Kentucky, I'm not gonna overlook it, but I'm not throwing your application away. But this is really the only document aside from your CV that you're preparing right now for the residency to see, and it shouldn't have those kind of errors, So you've got to pay attention to that kind of stuff, because it on the one hand, like December of your fourth year that's a busy time, and you're trying to do holidays too, and there's a lot of anxiety and stress sometimes with people, and so it's not unreasonable to see people make silly mistakes like that. But you know what? Sometimes when you're a pharmacist, you're in that same situation, and if you make a silly mistake,
I know one thing is I definitely do not want to see one generic letter sent to 40 different programs. We can tell that you did that. It's very off-putting. Do not do it. Please take the time, and even if your letter doesn't seem as good, even personalized to the institution is a really good place to start. Other things that really kind of turn you off are spelling errors, using the wrong institution name or the wrong RPD name at the top, using the wrong credentials if you mention any professionals in your letter. That all shows a lack of attention to detail, which is really something that we're looking for in a pharmacist.
I would say being too general, I don't expect to see the same letter. And yes, it takes a lot of time to kind of personalize it for each program, but you should have little pieces that you personalize throughout your letter. That's probably the big thing. That, and programs don't have time to read a 3-page letter of intent. So being as concise as possible while getting your point across and making yourself stand out are really the things that we're looking for.